It was around 12:30 at night when I stumbled home. I hadn't really drunk, although most people my age probably would have. My friends and I weren't really drinkers, which I did kind of like. Kind of just preferred to do board gaming whilst listening to some tunes of some independent artist we had just discovered that week, and this was that such week. The night was a silent night, as in any other summer night. Ordinarily, no cars, no drunkies really were to be heard in this rural area, but this particular season, the nights were really kind of still. Normally, there was at least a small wind coursing through the streets, rustling the leaves on the way. But it looked like even this quiet sound was absent. The only thing I heard were my footsteps and my rhythmic breathing. The first thing I noticed about my house was that the lights were on. This was not odd. My dad really never slept with the lights out. The odd thing was that the lights were on in our garden shed, where the tools and bikes were. I bet Dad forgot to put it out after he got himself a bottle of wine. He was a drinker, and he particularly drank a lot within the last few months. Before I tell you what happened when I stepped in our house, I must tell you some of the things about my dad. He had always worked as a clerk in some hardware shop in the city. Ever since I could remember, he's been one sad man, constantly depressed, constantly drunkenly telling me how much he loved me, or whenever I came home alone, he was crying. This had, of course, increased after my mom had died in a car accident. And, a year later, the disappearance of Eddie, my little brother. We were the only two left of a family of 4. He constantly helped me remember. I didn't think he really had any hopes up that Eddie would ever return, and I hated that for him. Every time either my mother or Eddie was being brought up by either of us, he would tell me how much he loved me, that he would do anything to protect me, that he would never, ever leave my side. It was drunken speech. I never really took him seriously. But above all, there was one emotion I felt strongest when thinking about my dad. Only one thought that was constantly stopping me from hitting him, kicking him, screaming against him. Pity. When I entered the house, I noticed my dad wasn't in the living room. The TV was on and the sheets were on the floor, joined by a couple of fallen bottles of beer. I thought he was in the bathroom for a piss, but there was no response when I called out for him. Something wasn't quite right, I thought. The thought that he might have died occurred to me very quickly. I was constantly worried about the man, so this really wasn't uncommon. I thought to investigate the shed and put the lights on over there so I could hit the bed. When I opened up the barn door, it did not take me long to see what had happened. Just beside a web of bicycles, just above a fallen stool, I saw Dad hanging. He was perfectly still, like a delicate twig, not a breeze of wind to break it. His face was pointed upwards, looking at the ceiling. I wasn't surprised, weirdly enough, to see him dead. I had always been prepared for that moment. The eerie thing that made my heart sink for most of what it was that he was so still, so stiff. Didn't look like my dad in the slightest. It was like an inanimate copy of Dad, a doll. Didn't look human at all, but it was my dad. I knew he was. He must have been hanging out on that rope for hours before. Poor fucking man. I did not move him for a couple moments. I did not know what to do. I should call the police, I thought. Let this nightmare be over with. Just get him out of the shed. Just fucking bury the old sod. Finally, his life of melancholy and despair had come to an end. He deserved that. It might seem funny that I almost felt relaxed, and somehow I felt guilty for it. But as I said before, I had always foreseen this moment happening. The sight might have been eerie at the moment. I did feel sad and sorry and shocked and horror in a kind of way. But I think my pragmatism kind of made me feel relieved. Before I turned and walked to the house, my eye caught something on a small table right next to the door. It was an envelope reading Andy. It was my father's handwriting, so it was easy enough to recognize. I thought of opening the envelope before calling the police. Then I thought I should call first. Ultimately, I decided to open the envelope and read the contents before calling anyone. This had to be the last moment I was with Dad. It just felt good to do it that way. Inside the envelope, I found a letter a few pages long. I looked at Dad one more time. The only thing I could see of his face were his nostrils and chin, perfectly still. I looked at the letter and I noticed that his handwriting had started to become kind of shaky halfway through the first page. And then again, he was drunk. I started reading. Andy, sorry you have to see me like this, son. I hope you will understand why I had to do this. I hope I did not make you jump. The last thing I wanted to do was scare you. I love you. I thought of shooting myself in the head, but getting a gun is harder than it seems. Besides, it would make such a mess. I absolutely don't want you to see your old man's brain scrambled all over the floor. Pills. I could have done pills, but that did not guarantee me death, and I wanted to die. I so wanted to die. I could never believe how much. I never liked life. You probably knew that. Mom died when you were young, and you two were sitting in the car, remember? And then she died, and you did not. And I've always been grateful for that. I hope some things will become clear in this letter. There are some things that I did keep from you, and I thought you ought to know. These things are part of the reason why I needed to leave. I hope you will forgive me for each of these things. I understand if you will hate me for forever, but you need to know. You just have to. But don't you ever forget, son, that I loved you, and you were everything to me. The night before your mom died, I had a dream. In that dream, you and mom were in a car accident. Both of you, not just your mom. When I woke up, mom was gone, taking you to her Aunt Nellie for the weekend. And someone was talking in my head. He asked me a question. He asked me, who must survive this accident? I was awake, and the dream is still haunting me. I thought it was not real, just a dream. But I said, Andy, because I loved you and you're my son. Mom would have probably done the same. It was around that time that the accident happened. It killed your mom, but you were completely spared. All you did was cry, but you were alive, buddy. The night of the funeral, when you and your brother were lying in bed with me, I had another dream. The same voice before spoke to me. He said I should do what he said, or he will take you to hell and torture you forever like he did with many other children. I could not speak with him, but I just had to do what he said. Please understand, I had to do things. He was real, and he was powerful. And I knew he was real and powerful. Very old. And never told kind of what it was. I think it was the devil. I think I made a deal with the devil. But I had to do it because you are so special. And I didn't want you tormented for eternity for my own mistakes. A few months later, you and your brother were still sleeping in my bed, and I had a dream. Remember the rabbit I gave you after the funeral? I think you called him Thumper, like that rabbit from Bambi, the white one with black spots. The voice said I had to bake it and feed it to you. The next night, the rabbit escaped. At least that's what I told you to. I twisted its neck when you were at school and prepared it in the shed. I had no love for the thing, but I remember that you two were horrified to learn it had disappeared. I'll never forgive myself for it. Those eyes of the rabbit haunted me ever since I committed that atrocity. Please forgive me. I had to do it, and I can still remember you liked it as well. You were both crying for the fleeing rabbit, but you loved the meat. Forgive me. I had to stop reading for a second. I felt dizzy from reading. Of course, I could still remember the moment Dad was crying while we were eating. I always thought he was just crying over Mom, and it made me sad again when we were crying over the rabbit. It made so much sense. Then I felt utter disgust. I couldn't look at my father. I wasn't really angry at him for doing that, but it was all too weird. A voice? I had to know more. There were a couple pages left, so I resumed reading. The voice left me alone for another 2 weeks, but by then I was terrified of it. I was constantly afraid it would appear in my dream again. When you two told me you were confident enough to sleep on your own, I persuaded you to stay because I was afraid. That very night, when I almost lost you from my bed, he talked to me again, and he said I had to do something horrible. It was so evil, I could hardly do it, and I even had a hard time telling you now. But the thing reminded me that he would torment you for eternity. 10,000s of years if I did not do what I know I said that I should do. So I had to do it. You see, he said I had to dig up your mom and feed a part of it to you. Although the meat would be rotting, there would still be a chunk or two left. I knew the old thing was true, and he was a monster and the devil, so I had to do it. I dug her up at night when you two were asleep. No one would ever notice what happened because the graveyard here is barely visible from the church and practically abandoned. I dug deep and opened the coffin. I saw her again. Could hardly recognize her, but some features of her looks were still there, like her long blonde hair and parts of her eyes, which looked like broken china. I remember that her skin was horrifyingly blighted, as if there was an ocean of water under her feeble skin. There were insects everywhere on her body. Maggots, ants, beetles, fucking swarming everywhere on her body, eating whatever was left of her. I brought a kitchen knife and pulled her arm up and did the deed. When I cut off a portion of her flesh from her arm, I saw that there were tons of small maggots in her flesh, and under her skin, falling from the flesh onto her body. The stink was fucking disgusting. I could barely prevent myself from vomiting, and so I took the flesh and I could not stop myself anymore. I quickly reached for a bucket somewhere in the shed and started puking as I never had before. I also started crying. I didn't dare read any further, and I was absolutely terrified to look at my father again. After a couple seconds in which I managed to regain courage, I read on. I took the letter and continued reading. I could barely prevent myself from vomiting, so I took the flesh and closed the coffin and managed to climb out and bury it all again. It all took me around 4 hours, and it was pure hell. I did it because I loved you, and I did not want you to suffer. You must understand this. Please understand. I went home and I started drinking. I am sorry for that. Beer and whiskey were the only things that distracted me from what I had done. It was the only thing that helped me go to sleep. And it did. When you got home from school the following day, you woke me up on the couch, and ever since then, I could not go to bed anymore. I was so afraid of him. He would never, ever leave me alone. So I drank so I could sleep. And then you woke me up here. I started cooking the rotting flesh for you very, very well. It was very tender, you said. I only fed it to you and gave your brother chicken. I read somewhere that human meat tastes like chicken, so I thought it was the fairest thing I could do. And you did not like it. You even said the chicken might have spoiled. And you were right, but it wasn't chicken. I fed you your mother. Until this very day, there's not a damn minute that I don't think about that. But I had to do it. I had to save you from him. The voice did not bother me for a couple years, but there was a bit of worry when the news said that a gravedigger could have been active in a local graveyard. But after a week or two, it was concluded that there might have been an invasion of moles. Thank God there was actually an invasion of moles a month later. Even though I did not hear from the voice for years, I was still afraid of it every day, because I knew it could contact me again, and he would demand something of me, and it would be even more disgusting than feeding you your mom. And yes, a few years after I did that, the voice did contact me again in my dreams, and he asked something to me, and I was right. He first reminded me that he was looking forward to slaughtering you over and over again. He said fucking terrifying things, which I'm not going to share with you. And then he demanded me to kill your younger brother and feed a piece of him to you. I stopped reading. I did the job in the bucket again. I knew what was coming next. I knew at the moment that he said he actually dug up Mom to do what he did. Eddie. All the pieces fell together. Why he never seemed hopeful, why he never wanted to talk about him again. I knew that bastard was going to do what he said he was. And I still could not look at the hanging sack of shit. And still, I could not stop reading. I had to continue. I killed him. I rode him to a forest far, far away and strangled him with a cord. He struggled for a minute or two, kicking the dashboard cabinet over and over and over and over again. And I think I heard him whisper, "Dad, please," but it was muffled. You know why I killed him? He would just die. He would just become a lifeless object. He would perhaps go to heaven and see Mom and live happy. If I did not kill him, I would send you to hell. You understand? I had to do it. God loved him, Andy. Every time I see him in front of me, he's smiling and being happy. He was a good kid. He was a smart kid. He was only 10 years old. I'm trembling so much as I'm writing this. I feel sorry. I killed my own son, but I did it all to keep him away from you. I cut off his earlobe into a plastic bag and then buried him in the forest. I wanted to kill myself right there, but if I did, I was afraid he would still take you and then torture you. I was at peace with the thought that I was only alive to prevent him from taking you. It was the only motivation for me to live. That and alcohol, sadly. That evening, I baked you the lobe, together with some chicken, and I went in the living room and I couldn't eat for a few days. I could not watch you eat it. I started drinking and drinking so much. I was drunk every hour. I wanted to die so much. But I was trapped to protect you. You know the police are still investigating the disappearance of your brother, so I think this letter should wrap things up. Just tell them what happened and that your dad is very sorry. A few months later is to say tonight, I got a dream again. It was him and he gave me another task and I could not do it anymore. I was never really sure if taking myself out would free me or you from the shackles I forged for myself, but I guess there's only one way to find out, bud. I'm sorry if it does not free you, and I'm sorry if you go to hell or something. The last task is just too much. I cannot do it. My life ends here. My son, I wish you the very best. Please forgive me for everything that I have done. Understand that I did this all to help you because you were my entire life. I was a slave to a demon, which I could not persuade to stop from contacting me. He's too great. He's too powerful. The last thing I have to say is to tell you why I took myself out. It was the task, you see. It was too much. In a fraction of a second after I dreamt that dream, I chose the easy way out and ran to the shed and took myself out. I wrote you a quick note, and I thought that you should probably read this to end the matter. But I was a fool. He's too powerful. I actually thought I could end me without letting you know what had happened, without telling you exactly why I took myself out, and without telling you the specific details of me taking out Eddie and digging up your mom. He made me right. Worst of all, I didn't even know that I did everything I have done for nothing. Me taking myself out breaks the deal. Andy, I wish you the best. 6 a.m. The police came and retrieved Dad's body. Nobody found the letter, for I immediately hid it in my pocket. I'm with my aunt now, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. I cannot believe that bastard's story. It just can't be. Yet, I am not sleeping. I'm afraid. What will happen when I sleep? I must sleep sometime. And right now, the stillness of the night persuades me to sleep. And I can't give in. Okay, well, that was very bleak and sad. It's good to be back, guys. I know I took a little bit of a hiatus from reading stories. Like I said, I've been doubling up videos on my main channel, and that is taking a tremendous amount of time and effort, and my brain is turning to mush. But if you guys did like this story, leaving a like would be great. And if you want to hear more, subbing is also a good way to stay updated on when I post. All right, guys, that does it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.